Hello everybody, my name's Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm, and today I want to do a kind of response video to something that Barb and Isabella at The Font put out about book snobbery, where they made a great case for the pressure that people sometimes feel to read the right things and not be seen reading the wrong things, and that sort of struggle with that this ridiculous notion of guilty pleasures versus expanding your horizons, etc., etc. I was going to kind of do maybe a sort of clickbaity counter-argument and out myself as a bit of a book snob and talk about that. But before I could record that, Steve Donoghued sort of put out his response and totally undercut anything that I was probably going to say in a classically Donoghuedian fashion, where he sort of really broke down the taxonomy of what snobbery is, and spoke about the difference between being ranking quality within one genre as opposed to across genres, so that it's okay to identify within literary fiction or something being marketed or being probably marketed, being sold to you as literary fiction, that there may be some that is qualitatively better than others, but to argue that literary fiction is by virtue of being marketed as literary fiction automatically superior to another genre. And the examples, the classic examples, are things like romance and westerns, or science fiction or comic books. To argue that one genre is better than another genre is, of course, intellectually bankrupt. He did it so well, and so even as I was going to kind of out myself as a book snob, actually I was aligning myself kind of with what he was getting to, which was that I probably am a bit of a snob about my own reading, only in as much as I choose not to only read things which are easy. And by easy, I mean easy for me. In other words, I read a whole ton of crime fiction, pulp fiction. I read a lot of comic books, and they're very easy for me to pick up. A sort of well-written, pulpy detective book, even like a good one. So let's say within detective fiction, there is good detective fiction and bad detective fiction. Even a good one can be a romp and easy for me to pick up and read large chunks of, or even go through the whole thing in a single sitting. And I could, if I chose, only do that for the rest of my reading life. And there are plenty of people, and I don't knock them, who only read crime fiction, and I belong to several groups on Facebook that only focuses on crime fiction. I'm happy to sit and chat and schmooze with people about that kind of thing. But for my own life, I separate out things that are easy for me and things that may be more of a challenge for me. And so if that's what I was going to describe as snobbery, that I actually do define, but only for myself, things that are easy for me and things that may be more challenging for me. And I choose to say, okay, I categorize some books as easy, and I read plenty of them, but I intersperse my reading with things that are going to be challenging. So a detective novel, for example, I may be able to get through in 3-4 hours, one sitting Saturday afternoon, and go through the whole thing, whereas something by Trollope or a history book may take me a couple of weeks to get through. And I try and make time for that, even though I think it is going to be demand more of me and be tougher and denser and not always enjoyable. Even within, let's say, literary fiction. I read Duck's Newburyport last year. I often read 2 or 3 books a week. Duck's Newburyport took me a full month to get through. I did not enjoy the experience of reading it. If you don't know, it's a stream of consciousness, like a 1,000-page novel that is written in a handful of sentences. And I really struggled with that. But I don't DNF books, because part of my ability to critically understand and interact with a book is reading the whole thing. And I can say that I didn't enjoy the experience of Doug's New Report, even though I know some people find it immensely relatable. But in order for me to be able to put that alongside something else, whether it's another stream of consciousness work, whether it's another piece of literary fiction, whether it's another 1,000-page novel, whatever category you want to put it into, in order for me to be able to say that this was a less satisfying reading experience for me, I have to get through the whole thing. So I guess in that way, I say I out myself as a kind of snob, but then I totally adhere to what Steve Donoghued spoke about when he said, you have to make your peace with the fact that you can't read everything, and you have to decide for yourself what you're going to read. And yes, it's a given that all reading is fine, and I don't judge anyone else for what they read, but I am tough on myself for the things that I read, and I know when I'm taking an easy path and I've got Bleak House sitting there and it's going to be 2-3 weeks of my reading life, as opposed to another Ed McBain 87th Precinct, which I can toss up in an afternoon. I go through 6 days a week if I want, but I don't. I choose to only do 4 or 5 of those over a year, rather than go through all 50-odd in the space of a month or two, which I could easily do. One other aspect which Steve didn't touch on, which I would like to address in terms of snobbery, is I actually find inverse snobbery to be just as pernicious and unpleasant as actual snobbery. And this is a kind of anti-intellectualism, sort of Trump era. No, I wouldn't want to do that kind of attitude, which I see in some bookish people. Again, mainly the people that are very focused on a genre without realizing they're very focused on a genre, who never consider anything outside the boundaries of what they're doing at, because that's boring. A number of times I've been in more Facebook groups than YouTube, where the idea of classics comes up and people say, "Ugh, they're so boring and they're just rubbish and they don't speak to me," and they've got the same. I mean, it's the attitude is, why would I want to learn algebra? What's that got to do? When am I ever going to need that in life? I can't bear the anti-intellectualism, which is typified by the response, the classic response when someone is asked a question, which is, how am I supposed to know that? That's the worst thing I could ever hear someone asking, how am I supposed to know something? Like, the idea that you might know more about something or be interested in things beyond your narrow world, that idea is ridiculous. I hate that, and that kind of inverse snobbery sort of winds me up probably more than anything else. I think that when it comes to snobbery, I think it doesn't matter if you're snobbish about your reading. It doesn't matter if you're snobbish about books. I don't care what you're about snobbery. I think as long as you maintain your curiosity and your humility, then you can do whatever the heck you want. I've made my peace, as Steve Donoghued recommends, with the fact that I'm probably never going to read Finnegan's Wake. I read Joyce's shorter works. I struggled through Ulysses. A large chunks of it went right over my head, despite the fact that I'm the son of Irish Jews. Bloomsday is one day before my birthday. I don't think I got maybe even 20% of Ulysses, and so the idea of sitting down and just having the words of Finnegan's Wake go past my eyes, I think, is probably not going to be the most effective use of my time. And I'm not, but that's not me being snobbish about it. Saying, "Oh, God, what's he want to write all those weird phrases with allusions to Catholic saints for?" It's not about that. It's about me determining what I need to do in order to keep momentum, keep enjoying my reading, keep exploring and pushing my boundaries, but also deciding that maybe there are boundaries sometimes. So I hope that's not snobbery, but if it is, I'm okay with it. But one area of book snobbishness that is almost universally agreed upon, and I've seen this mentioned countless times on BookTube by a whole range of bookish people who probably don't consider themselves book snobs, but agree almost completely with, is that they hate movie tie-in editions. Everyone's a snob about a movie tie-in. And so I decided to go back to my collection, and I have here 10 books that are movie tie-ins that I have purchased and bought and read and sit proudly in my collection. And this is my clickbaity attempt at having a go at all you movie tie-in snobs. And I thought I'd take you through them. And what I would love is if anyone can tell me what movie tie-in novels they have and have read. I'll even allow a TV tie-in if that's what you're into. But it has to be a book that was published before the film or TV adaptation and then republished with a new cover linking it to that adaptation. Okay. So starting with, I've got these, put these in my roughly, I think, chronological reading order. So as I came to them in my life. So starting with the first. This is A Kestrel for a Knave, take the glare off that, by Barry Hines. Was made into the movie Kes, directed by Ken Loach, and there are versions of the book that were published, as is often the case with a movie tie-in, under the movie title. So this is the original title of the book was A Kestrel for a Knave, but you can also see it as Kes, same book. And we read this in school. This was assigned to me when I was I think 12 years old. And I went to a very privileged boys' school, very middle-class upbringing, just outside London. And this is a book about the north of England and about people living in poorer circumstances than I was acquainted with at the time. And it's about a boy who has a tough life and the solace he finds in a kestrel and the work he does to learn how to care for this kestrel and the emotional development that he goes through in caring for another creature, something that was missing from his life. It was a heartbreaking story. It was very hard for me to understand. I mean, it's a slight work and it's not complicated language, but it was so far out of my experience and had a lasting impact on me. It's I think probably one of the few, maybe the only one, where I don't think I've ever gone back and watched the film, and not because that I have a problem with Ken Loach, although he has a big problem with me. But I've never gone back and watched the film because this was one of my early reading experiences, and the film is probably, I mean, the book's a downer, and the film probably even more so. It's a real sort of kitchen sink, late 60s, early 70s British cinema. But that, I'm very proud to have this film tie cover. This isn't the book, this isn't the version that I bought that I had from school. I went afterwards and added this to my collection because I wanted my own copy of it. So I'm not sure where I got this, but it's stamped. This has got a library thing in it, and this is stamped. It says here, Gumley House Library, and Gumley House is a primary school somewhere in South London, I believe. I looked it up. So I've got their library copy, which must have got sold off, and that's my first movie tie-in cover. Kestrel for a Knave made the movie Kes. My second is one of the earliest books that I ever bought for myself. So I bought this in my university library. I was studying English literature, and so I had a whole bunch of books that I was supposed to read for uni, and I just decided to buy this book. Now, I don't remember whether I'd seen the movie first. I don't know. Probably not. But I decided I was going to become an independent reader and choose things for myself and read for pleasure. And I bought this copy of The Accidental Tourist, and this is the movie tie-in. That's the cast: William Hurt and Kathleen Turner plays William Hurt's wife, and Jean Davis won an Oscar, actually Best Supporting Actress, for her role as Muriel. And this was my first Anne Tyler, and I've read her ever since. I bought this in March 1990, so that's my first year of university. At some point I must have picked up and added to it this reading guide that Vintage put out, which is a lovely pamphlet. This is, hey boys and girls, this is what life was like before the internet. Things like this you would find in bookshops. This was an extra guide and information. And if you like this book, you can read other stuff and a biography of Anne Tyler. And this was like super helpful to me after I read the book to find this in a bookshop and read it and understand more about Anne Tyler and what else she'd written. We did not have the ability to just go online and get a list of all Anne Tyler's books. So that was good. Anyway, so this is my copy of Accident Tourist, which I deeply love as a book. It's a terrific film. I've seen the film. The film is directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who also directed The Empire Strikes Back, famously The Big Chill, and wrote, I think has been involved as a screenwriter in a whole bunch of Star Wars movies and other films over the years. And he may still be with us. I think his son Jake is a film director these days. Anyway, Accidental Tourist was a pivotal book in my reading career. From around about the same time, I've got The Mosquito Coast by Paul Theroux. Again, so I was a big fan of Harrison Ford. I don't know why I would have got this. I picked this up in a second-hand bookshop, not my university bookshop, so there it has inside it. There's my name, £1.50, so I know exactly which second-hand bookshop this was. This was because I know how they wrote the things in pencil. This was a book shop called 2J's in Edgware, where I grew up, and I bought this in July 1990. It's a fantastic book. I've mostly forgotten. I don't know if people are still reading The Mosquito Coast, although I just read this week, coincidentally, that Paul Theroux's nephew, Justin, who I don't think is Paul Louis' father? Whatever. There's a bunch of Therouxs. Paul and Louis may be directly related, and Justin, I think, is Louis' first cousin. Justin is Paul Theroux's nephew, and he is writing an adaptation that I think he's planning to direct, a new version of The Mosquito Coast. It's a terrific book, really compelling. He's a really, really complex character. What's his name? Ali. I can't remember the family name. But the character played by Harrison Ford in the movie is in the book is a very complex, very dictatorial father of a family, and takes them off into the jungle and has weird ideas and weird plans for the family, and essentially slowly goes mad over time. No spoilers, but really terrific book. Again, early, pivotal, important book for me in my reading career. The movie, Ali Fox, I think is Harrison Ford's character, and the father in the story, and one of the son is played in the movie by River Phoenix, who is one of my favourite movie actors, one of the Lost Boys. Just a beautiful man, a fine actor. One of his great performances there, though, I'll take Running on Empty, even Sneakers every time. But that's Mosquito Coast by Paul Theroux. Also, around about the same time, I've got this movie cover, and this is an autobiography. So this is the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley, and this is the movie version with Denzel playing Malcolm X. It was directed, of course, by Spike Lee, co-written by Spike Lee, and I think I probably read this before I ever saw the movie. And so why am I talking about these movie times? Because in many ways, this was the only access we had. There was no, I couldn't walk into a shop, see this and say, well, I don't want the movie tie-in, I'm going to shop around and look for an older version or an earlier edition. That wasn't an option. We didn't have the internet. There was nowhere else to order from. If I decided that I wanted to read Malcolm X's autobiography, the reason I was deciding I wanted to read it is because it was in the cultural zeitgeist. The movie was being made, people were talking about it again, and it was republished in this edition. And this was the edition that was available. And so I bought this, and it's a terrific. If you haven't read it, it's a really fine work, and the things you think you know about Malcolm X, and often the short version that popular culture likes to do is set Malcolm X in opposition to Martin Luther King, as one as a pacifist and one as a by any means necessary, including the inference is by violent means. And if you read Malcolm X's journey and his life and where he ends up, it is very different from that. And so while he gets involved with the Nation of Islam, which holds some very retrograde and weird views about white people and Jews, for example, actually his journey in discovering Islam beyond the Nation of Islam is very inspiring and beautiful. And in the last part of the book, he goes on the Hajj, a spiritual journey and a physical journey to Mecca, and meets Muslims from all over the world, including some who are men of faith, of true believers in Islam, who are not necessarily people of colour. And the way his attitudes evolve and the way his journey through life changes him as a human being. It's a terrific book. I really, if you have any interest in this era and Malcolm X himself, it's great. Well written, it's pacey, it's got some great anecdotes in there, horrifying stories of the things people of colour have done to their hair over the years, and the pain that they have gone through to straighten and make their hair look less ethnic. But that's trivialising the true story. Great book, recommend it, and I love this edition. Next up is kind of a cheat, but but it is kind of got movie thing on it. And this is my copy, my old Penguin copy of The Big Sleep, Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, which has on it Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall from the classic Howard Hawks movie, The Big Sleep. Is of course Philip Marlowe. I love this because I was introduced to Chandler by a colleague at work when I was working in London. This shouldn't have a date on it, it doesn't have, but this cost me £1, and you can see the same pencil. This is still 2J's much missed second-hand bookshop where I bought a lot of things that I read in those days, and this cost me £1, and I love it. So this was my first probably introduction to Chandler. This is a great place to start. I'm a big fan and gone on and read everything else you want, and it's a terrific movie. The movie co-written, interestingly enough, by Nobel Prize winner William Faulkner. And also Lee Brackett, great female crime writer, and someone else whose name I've forgotten. But that's The Big Sleep. Another movie tie-in, and we're back to Denzel. This is Devil in the Blue Dress by Walter Mosley, who is a very successful and popular crime writer in America. This is the first in the series, the Easy Rolling series. The reason this blew up was because Bill Clinton had famously spoken about it. So occasionally they'll ask presidents, "What are you reading at the moment? What's on your bedside table?" And he mentioned Devil in the Blue Dress by Walter Mosley, or at least he mentioned Walter Mosley. I don't know if it was this specific book. And so the first in the series blew up, and roughly about the same time that was blowing up, the movie was being made with directed by Carl Franklin, I believe, and it's got Denzel as Easy and a young, what's his face? I can't remember the name of that. What's his name? The guy who plays War Machine in the Avengers is playing Mouse, and Jennifer Beals as a character. Also, that's a reference to an Italian movie where a guy walks around Italy asking everyone if they know Jennifer Beals. Anyway, she's also in this. If you have any love at all for Jennifer Beals, she's great in this. Terrific book. I had moved to Israel at this point, so we were living with a small baby in a tiny apartment, and my mum was visiting for the first time. It was my son's first birthday. She was coming out, and I asked her to buy me a copy of Devil in a Blue Dress because of Bill Clinton, and I think I stayed up all night and read this in one sitting, and I've read every other Easy Rawlins book. He's done 13, 14 of those, and he's got other series with Paris Minton and what's his name? Socrates Fortlow and Leonard McGill, and I've got a lot of time for Walter Mosley. He is an African-American writer, he's a Jewish writer, and he's a fantastic crime writer. Highly recommend it. My next one, this is from later in that year, so this is 96, so I'm still living in Israel, but my mum must have bought this in 2Js because that's their pencil thing. It cost me £4. And this is Awakenings by Oliver Sacks, again, non-fiction, that was made into a movie, directed by Penny Marshall, starring Robert De Niro and Robin Williams, and it's a terrific movie if you get a chance. And this is a big, chunky, clinical work about Oliver Sacks's work treating almost comatose or catatonic is I think is the right expression, patients, and finding a way to bring them out of their catatonia and awaken them. And it's a fine piece of work. And if you've never read Oliver Sacks, I wouldn't necessarily start with this because it's chunky. But The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is little vignettes from his life working with patients with various neuropathies. He's a deeply humane look at the struggles that people have, and specifically with neurological issues. And Awakenings is a great book, and I love the fact that I've got this movie tie-in cover because I love the movie and I love the book, and I've read a whole bunch of Oliver Sacks stuff, most of which probably unfilmable, although in one of his books he does talk about Temple Grandin, who was a woman with autism, very high functioning, a very brilliant animal behaviourist. I'm not sure that's the correct term for what she does, but she has written her own book, which I've read, called Thinking in Pictures, describing what it's like with her particular form of autism and how she responds and reacts, and that was made into a TV movie, I think. So that's now okay. But so yeah, I'm not sure we're going to see many more movie adaptations of Oliver Sacks' works, but I highly recommend it. Here's another one, odd little one. This is called U-Turn by John Ridley, which was made into an Oliver Stone movie. It says, now, a major Oliver Stone movie. I'm not sure that's really a TV tie-in cover. I could be cheating here. I bought this. This is from Hodges Figures, which you may or may not know is a bookshop in Dublin. So this was on a business trip to Ireland, in Dublin, and of course I was going to bookshops wherever I end up in the world, specifically in English-speaking countries. So I was back in Dublin and bought this in Hodges Figures. Now, I sometimes talk when I pick up a new author. I sometimes talk about making an investment. What do I mean by that? I'm saying I try different things because, not because I want to be able to say, oh yeah, I knew that guy way back when, but at some point when that author makes more of a splash and becomes more relevant, I can look back and say, well, yeah, I've been following this work for a while, and so I made an investment in John Ridley, and I bought 2 more of his novels that he published after this, and they were sort of crime throwaway, unusually featuring a black protagonist. John Ridley is a black author, and this is great. And the film is sort of seedy and dark and noirish. The other 2 books that I read after this were probably less successful, and I sort of stopped reading him after that. Like I stopped looking out for new books by John Ridley. Jump forward a few years, and John Ridley was awarded an Oscar for his screenplay for 12 Years a Slave. So it's not about my investment paying off, but it's about reading and involving myself in authors who finding out if they're going to have any relevance to what we do and what we care about. When I saw him appearing in all the shows and then actually winning the Oscar, I thought, I read a bit of John Ridley, and there's a reason he's been recognised for the quality of his work. Another one, penultimate. I have a copy of, this book is called Carter, which was actually the movie Get Carter, starring Michael Caine. My name is Michael Caine. And worst Michael Caine accent ever. Impression, terrible. I can't show you the back of this because there's a naked woman on it. The book was originally written, it was called Jack's Return Home, written by Ted Lewis. I have this, and I have one of the sequels that also has Jack Carter in it. And I love this edition. You can see from the sticker on the front that I bought this for £2 in a bookshop called Murder One, which is sadly no longer around. This was in centre of London, just by Leicester Square Tube. So as you Leicester Square connects all the way up to Tottenham Court Road. The whole road is called Tottenham Court Road. The tube, the Leicester Square up to Tottenham Court Road tube, is connected by the Tottenham Court Road, along which there are a bunch of bookshops, and traditionally were a wealth of bookshops. There are still some remaining, Henry Port's and one or two other, and the Foyles, of course, further down towards the Tottenham Court Road end of things, is still there. But there, and Blackwell's, I think, is still there. But there were a bunch of independent bookstores, including Murder One, which was specialised in crime, new crime, and I picked this from the sale rack, a beautiful sort of beaten up pan edition, and I love these kind of mass market editions. And there was also, I think, a Silver Moon bookshop, which was women's lit. There was a bookshop called Sports Pages, which only sold books about sports, sport, very American. I had, over the years in the late 90s, when I used to go back after we'd moved to Israel, I used to go back to London, and whenever we were in London for any length of time, I would always take one day where I would go by myself, leave my wife with the kids at my mum's or her mum's, and go up to town and spend the day walking from one end of Tottenham Court Road to the other, going into every single bookshop and buying probably at least one thing in each bookshop. It was, again, sort of just pre-internet, so late 90s, early aughts, and that was the way to discover books. Maybe I read a review in Time Out or in the newspapers, but you didn't have the internet. If you wanted to discover books, the only way to do so was in the wild, and it was a source of deep joy. I was, of course, familiar with the movie From This Point Get Carter, and this was a famous bit of noir fiction, British noir fiction. And it's a real nasty-hearted little book, very short, it's under 200 pages. And if you get hold of a copy, I highly recommend it. And I love that. Look at that, Michael Caine with a shotgun walking on the beaches of northeast England. Terrific, nothing like that. And then the last one, I think, is probably going to be familiar to all of you. I had a big fan of the James Bond movies, always was. The rule is that your favourite James Bond movie is the first one that you saw in the cinema, which means that my favourite will always be The Spy Who Loved Me, because that was my year in 1977, the Lotus Esprit into the water, turning into a submarine, and Jaws, and everything about it is absolutely. See Ringo Starr's wife as the Russian, the skiing off the cliff, and the Union Jack parachute in the opening sequence. Everything about it is just deeply embedded in my heart, and remains my favourite James Bond movie. And much later, so I was a big fan of the movies, and we used to watch them, and they were always a big event when they came on TV, and we would record them and watch them again. And I had never read the books, and then I think in my 30s I decided, well, I'll go back and I should really start with these, and kind of understanding they were going to be a little retrograde and misogynist and maybe even a little unpleasant. Ian Fleming was not the greatest human being, but I went through and started picking them up, and again, picked them up cheap when I could. You all see this one, also from 2J's. There's the pencil, £1.50. This cost me I bought this in 1998, so it's a visit back to London after I was already living in Israel. And this is a fabulous movie tie-in version of From Russia with Love. So again, this is Pan did these glorious editions. It's not Pan's first, the first edition paperbacks are worth a pretty penny, but look at that on the back. There's some stills from the movie there, and then the beautiful man that Sean Connery was on the cover with it. And if you look, I love the fact that it's even got the sort of made to look with these cut out, you can see me, these cut out bits to make it look like a bit of movie film. Again, kids, this is what movies used to look like before digital. They were actually fed through projectors, and these were the holes that were guiding anyway. So I love that very much. I've got a whole set of Pan's different era Pan editions of Ian Fleming's books. A couple of them I have sort of movie tie-ins, so I think I've got Goldfinger, and maybe Thunderball is also a sort of movie tie-in. Movie From Russia with Love was the second movie, so this is not the second book. This was further down the series, but this was the second movie that was made after Dr. No was the first one. So this is round about 1963, directed by Terence Young, and written. The script, I think, is I don't know if it's only, but one of the screenwriters was Richard Maybaum, Maibaum, who, this is 1963, From Russia with Love. Richard Maybaum was still being credited as at least a contributor to the script until 1989, License to Kill. So that was 26 odd years he was involved with the Bond franchise. And I was very good friends, still am good friends, with a young lady, and now a woman my age, who had a very similar surname and claimed to be a relative of Richard Maybaum. And I remember very clearly going to see each new Bond movie in the 80s. So it would have been something like, so 83 is Octopussy, 85 is A View to a Kill, 87 The Living Daylights, and 89 License to Kill. I must have seen one or more of those with my friend, and each time we'd be watching and Richard Maybaum's name would come up in the credits, she would give a little yelp of delight, and so we still tease her about her relationship to Bond. Anyway, that is the last of my movie tie-ins. I've been here 40 minutes, so if you're still watching, you must be absolutely bonkers. If you have any movie tie-in books in your collection, I would love to hear about them. Go nuts. Thank you. Bye.